Hey, good evening, everyone. Thanks for jumping on again. Webinar number 6 for us now. Some I've got first timers jumping on, some it's 6 out of 6. So many thanks to all of you that, be it your first time or be it a very familiar scenario. Thanks for being part of it. Hopefully, it's been something that you found valuable, not only for your own environment, but just a little bit of education and some discussion. We will be looking to do a third series with some different topics, some different guests and bits and pieces. But given that we're now past when a winter season would have completed, where the next series will probably be a little bit more spread out, be that sort of once a month maybe, or once a fortnight type sessions rather than the every week, so that it's you can start to get used to having your off season back. Although I'm sure for some people it's a good opportunity to actually be able to talk to some people. It's a bit more than just a couple of individuals that are inside your walls at the moment. But very, very good to have all of you on a lovely Tuesday evening. So as we said, 4th session is recorded, so we will push on with it, and any other latecomers can jump in as we go along. So pretty standard now. Obviously, have your microphones muted. The session is recorded, so if you want to have your camera on or off, that is up to you. Doesn't really make much difference on the recording anyway. And obviously, take as many notes and take any photos that you want to as we go. The slight difference with this evening's webinar is this one is intended to be a bit more of a discussion piece, more like a roundtable sort of discussion as we go, rather than just a presentation with some questions at the end. So at any stage throughout this evening, if you want to ask a question, just you can put your hand up within your within the Zoom. You could be able to click on the hand icon if you have that there, or then just come off mute and interrupt us essentially. So don't let us just waffle on all the way to the end and then try and remember and go back. This one is designed as a little bit shorter in content, so that there is more discussion that we can have, and we can maybe give you an answer that's a little bit more tailored toward your landscape potentially, rather than just what it looks like from our end. So if you haven't been on a Zoom, one of these webinar Zooms before with us, my name is Dan Shepherd. I'm the TD, Head of Football for Hills Football Association. Currently hold an A license as well as a C license instructor, and present community courses. Very limited playing background and university, and but a very big coaching experience has taken me across obviously different countries and different levels of the game within Australia. That's enough about me. On to our guest this evening. So we have Nadine, who's joining us this evening. So very grateful to have her tonight. So Nadine, your role is the Talented Player Pathways Manager, correct, at Football New South Wales?
Yeah, that's correct.
So explain to us what that means. What do you do sort of in a regular day-to-day rather than a COVID day-to-day?
So basically it means I guess it's kind of speaks for itself, but Pathways Manager for girls football. The girls that I mostly work with range from would say under 10, so from the SAP environment, and we go up to under 18s. So yeah, basically my main role is to manage and look after our Girls Institute program, so part of the elite pathway, and within that it's I do some coaching as well, but primarily manage the day-to-day operations of the program, but also the delivery of the program in a sense of what the girls require at that level, what we need to do with them at that level to then progress them onto a W League club or a national team.
How long have you worked at Football New South Wales now?
I'm going to show my age a little bit. I've been there for about 15, 16 years now.
Wow.
And yeah, pretty much been in the same role throughout. It's just obviously the roles just kind of expanded and got a little bit bigger as you know, women's football has evolved and become bigger in itself. So you know, that certainly made my role grow into what it is today. But you know, I'm extremely grateful and you know, love the job that I've got. So no, all good things.
What's been the biggest changes to the institute program then across the last, say, 5 to 10 years?
Definitely becoming a full-time program. So previous to that, we used to run, and you know, some of our older coaches on the call will probably remember, but we used to run junior development programs and elite development programs. So they ranged again from around 10, 11-year-old females, and we only went up to around 15, 16-year-old girls. They were a part-time program. So it was more of you know, what we would consider now to be the girls TSP program. It was a supplementary program to their club football. So we would get them 1 to 2 nights a week. That then evolved into where we would have them a little bit more permanently, but they still played club football. But what they would do when they came in with us is that we played in a boys competition.
Yes.
So it was semi part-time. But they were still involved in I guess, a girls' team in a club environment. So obviously then now what it is, you know, is a full-time program. We train 4 times a week, you know, matches on the weekends in the NPL1 women's competition at Football New South Wales. So that for me would be the biggest change. But I guess just in that's within the program in our landscape. But I guess across, you know, not only Australia, but across the world, there's been far more investment and eyes on the game in terms of the women's game. So it has grown, you know, hugely over the past 5 to 10 years. And yeah, with that shows, you know, I mean, it shows the dedication and, you know, support and input from a lot of people, like, you know, like everyone on the call now, but as well, you know, from a national and W League perspective. But yeah, so it certainly has grown quite a lot over the last 5 to 10 years.
I guess that's your role has sort of changed, and the program has developed as female football has sort of taken on that role itself, or the journey across the world, definitely in Australia anyway. It has developed from sort of girls only playing in mixed teams to now where you've got standalone girls comps, and now we've got potentially the problem that we view it very similar to the male game, but we just don't have the critical mass to be able to treat it the same. But we'll touch on that later as we come through.
Yeah.
So we've only really got sort of 3 topics to go through this evening, to be honest, and hopefully there'll be some discussion in amongst those. And we're going to talk about essentially players and coaches, and then the national team, really, and what that looks like for not only the Matildas, but for the very exciting 23 World Cup. So we've got to make sure that we get COVID sorted so that we can get out and see the World Cup. That's our big end game for this. All right, so just before we push on, we've got a video to start with. I need to turn the sound up.
Venue has a shot, and what a shot it is. Dowie, stolen behind, what a goal! Tash Dowie! What a spin. Kristen Hamilton, what a hat-trick! Crocker's in on goal, it's a cracker! It's an absolute belter. All the way through for Sanka!
So obviously that video is made for Female Football Week, but I think it really highlights where female football is at the moment, that we do cater for basically every level of football, no different to we do with the males and females. And that leads me on to my first point here about players. So obviously taking a slightly heels football look at female football, we feel quite proud that we can offer something for a female football player from all ages. So we start with our Little Legends program, where obviously we've got in this picture one lovely little girl joining in there. So we start with a 3 years old in this program, and my 5-year-old has done Little Legends as well. She thoroughly enjoyed it, but then decided that she wanted to do more dancing than she did football, so she stopped that one for a little bit. Moving into our Mini Roos, Mini Tildas space down in the clubland, we've got GSAP, we've got obviously skill acquisition phase in clubland, we've got GCL, which has now obviously upgraded, and we've got teenage year groups in club space, we've got Women's Premier League, we've got the overs and the all age groups, that we can basically cater for female football at any age and any skill level, really. That it doesn't really make a difference as long as we've got players and coaches that are willing to be in that space. Females can access all of it, just like no different to it is in the male space. And that's the challenge, to make sure that we can get the game to exactly parity in terms of equal everything. But that's still developing over time. It was not too long ago that it probably wasn't that common, right? And we can now see as we progress further forwards up there from anyone wants to participate into the talented pathway. So this links a little bit, Nadine, into what you were saying before with your role into a more heels football orientated space. So up our player pathway at the moment, we start with association football, where you can obviously access Little Legends from 3 years old into, you might stay under that umbrella all the way through to your over 35s or over 45s. Obviously, the next step would be skill acquisition phase, Girls Conference League or WMPL programs, and then obviously Institute, W League, and national teams. I haven't missed anything out from there, Nadine, have I? That's the way that we would look to go.
Yep.
Would you have a rough guess of how many Hills locals you might have in the Institute program?
Off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure we've got at least 3 or 4 in the current program. And I know we are certainly looking at a couple more for the 2022 program. So obviously from a talented pathway point of view and talent identification point of view, to leading up to that kind of higher end of the pathway, the relationship that we have with our clubs and associations is very important. It has taken quite a long time to get to a point where we are. I think that the clubs and associations do support the program. They understand the program a little bit more and what we're trying to do. And in particular, from a Hills football point of view, I have a very good relationship, obviously, with Dan and Alex Tobin. So we certainly don't miss anyone, any talented players from the Hills pathway to lead into that Institute pathway.
Yeah, and hopefully the end goal is that we do have some locals that are participating in national teams, in W League roles and stuff. And we've had, obviously, I've got Emily there in the national team picture. She was a Borkham Hills player for, I believe it was 1 season. And we've got Kaya Simon also was a Hills United player for, I believe, a season or so. So we have had a couple of Matildas come through the area, albeit relatively short stints. But we'd love to see a few more sort of reach that level and come through along their different ways. All right, on to my next slide.
I don't know if Dan Angelo's just sent through a question for me. Do you want me to answer that now?
Yeah, go for it.
So I think everyone can see it, but I'll read the gist of it out anyway. So what are the most obvious attributes that players need to work on at the institute that potentially club coaches could be focusing on in their landscape? Look, Angelo, honestly, the biggest thing for us is probably their technical ability. So previous to, I think, the SAP program coming into play, we would have to take a lot of time to work on their, skill sets. So, we're talking about the four core skills. We did have to spend a lot of time on that because they weren't doing it as much in the club space. With SAP now, it is getting so much better. And for anyone that's seen some of the, 12, 13, 14s, even probably around our 15s age group now, they're technically so much better than some of our girls that are in our older 17s and 18s program, just because they had that contact and they had those things worked on at their club level. So I think definitely, we want to see them come into our section of this pathway with better technical ability. And I think you see, if for those of you that watch the Olympics and the keeping up with those trends, is that previously it was, the USA team, I mean, they're still number one, I think, but they've previously been number one because of their, I guess, physical attributes and having such a physical domination in the game at that level. Now we're starting to see more technically based teams come through and are winning games at the international level. So yeah, I think definitely, Angelo, is that we need to see them, and hopefully the clubs and associations can work with them more on the technical front, not so much about the game. I find that female players are quite intelligent. And we have a lot of female players in the game that, that they just understand the game. They just understand football. And the only thing that lets them down is their technical ability. They can see something, they want to do something, but they're not able to because of their, potentially technical deficiencies. So yeah, for me, to answer your question, it was a bit long-winded, but in short, it's definitely the technical attributes of the female players.
Yep. So anyone working with players that wants to help progress them, go forward into institute or other programs, just make them as good as we can with the ball, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Which I think if the players got to choose their own session, I'm pretty sure they would probably work along the same sort of aspect. They want to have the ball at their feet as much as they possibly can, or
exactly.
The only time they want to give it away is if they're scoring goals.
Yeah.
Excellent. Any other questions from the group before we push on? Any questions about either the talented pathway or the previous slide around what Hills football have to offer the female space? Anyone that I've stages that we potentially missed out? Okay, so I'm not going to read through the entire slide for you there. You can all read as well, but the general gist of it is that 99% of males and females are genetically the same, but the 1% that is different is really quite key, very key. It makes some really big changes in not only the obvious, but in the way that we see and perceive and understand things as well. And it's going to have an effect on why males or females do or don't do certain actions. And it's worthwhile for us as coaches potentially to be able to understand that. And where this slide is sort of coming from is from my own personal experience. I coached a under 16s girls team my first year when I landed fresh off the airplane in Sydney. I took a Sydney University under 16 girls. So a few years ago now, because that was the year group that went 12s, 14s, 16s. So you can tell that was a few years ago because the competition has changed age groups since then. But I really struggled at the beginning as a male teaching females because I hadn't really been exposed to it that often, particularly in a team space. And there were certain things that I was very naive in, just kind of assuming that the way I thought was the only way in many ways, and the way I thought was the right way, and the way I was coached was the way to do things, and the way I was motivated was the right way. And I actually think, looking back on things, that season of my coaching, I probably learnt more in that one season than I have in many of the years combined, in terms of being able to convey my message and understanding how you've got to tinker your message to get it across to your participants rather than the other way around. There is, I guess, two responsibilities. The learner's responsibility to be in the right attitude and framework to learn, but then it's for the teacher, the educator, to make sure that the message is delivered in an appropriate manner for your learners. And being a very naive 20-something male, coaching this group of 16 or 14, 15, 16 girls, I struggled at the beginning. And I think results were probably, and definitely on-field understanding was hindered at times because of that. And I really wish I'd sort of seen this slide and sort of done a little bit more research before I started the season as to what that would be. But baptism of fire that I came through the other side, sort of with my eyes open a little bit. But just looking through the table there, obviously there's a few differences in terms of feelings versus actions, interest in things versus people. And obviously I actually really struggled with the team in that they were very social, wanted to get to training and start chatting at the start of training. How was school? How was this? And I was going crazy, saying, get a ball, start kicking the ball, start warming up, start playing. And we actually came up with a strategy that we not set exact parameters of what time they could do what, but they almost understood that they had 5 minutes when they arrived at training to have a chat and a discussion and get that out of their system. And then there was a bit of football time, start kicking the ball around, and depending on what time they arrived, what time training was going to start. We actually sort of built in some conversation time with training to make sure that I wasn't trying to argue and shout and repeat myself all the time. No, actually, rather than trying to stop them from doing something, actually embrace it and bring it into what they were there for. And a lot of that was the social element that, they still wanted to win and they wanted to be good footballers and they want to get better and all of that. But they did want to relate with the players within their team a lot more. Whereas I was used to working in male teams where, to be honest, we couldn't give a stuff about the rest of the team unless it was my best mate. But then we would be catching up after training or something like that. So we would put that aside. So that was something interesting to deal with. The other one that jumps out to me there, and Nadine, anything that jumps out to you after this one, be worth your insight, was the last one there, mental preferences, hardwired to sympathize or to empathize. And where that one sort of shone out for me was that they would be, I'd never heard in a training session the word sorry used so much, that they would make a foul or a tackle and it'd be sorry. And I'd be, no, good, kick them even more. That's the enemy that you're going to be playing against next week. And that sort of response from me as a coach really didn't work. Not only were they not really interested in that, but it was particularly their teammates. They wanted to help pick them up and they wanted to make sure that they were okay. And that element of team camaraderie, I'd never really experienced that before. So it took me a while to get used to it. And I kind of had a decision to make at one stage. Did I ban the sorry word or did we embrace it? And we went the other way and we embraced it and said, right, let's be a team. We'll pick them all up together. Maybe on the weekend, we won't worry about the opposition so much. But it was still part of an interesting way that, again, I could have spent a lot of time repeating myself and not worrying about football things rather than worrying about the language that is used. Dean, any experiences, differences you think between males and females?
Yeah, for sure. I think, from a female perspective is that, girls are very impressionable. They want to impress the coach. So, as an example, and they will take things very literal. So boys don't tend to take things as literal as the females do. So as an example, if we're us as coaches, if we're telling, our 2 and 5 that we want them to, make more forward runs, or we want them to get forward more in a game, a male player will probably think about that a little bit more and probably won't do it every time. But as soon as you say to a female player, I want you to get forward more in a game, they will do it every single time. Because they do want to impress you, and they, again, with that empathy and befriending, and they've got a lot of feelings and things like that. They want to impress, and they want to make you happy, and they think that by doing that, it's to take things very, very literal. Attitudes and tendencies are very different. So again, to what Dan alluded to is, it's when the male players show up to training, they just get straight in, they get stuck in. With the girls, they need a little bit more motivation and a little bit more, talking to get them to that point. And then I guess the last point is probably, I guess this is why we've kind of gone to a little bit more of a player-centered coaching approach. And I know that it's very applicable to the male game, but I feel like it's even more so applicable to the female game, because you now, more so than probably 5-10 years ago, is that we really need to manage the player, and we need to manage their emotions and their feelings and their relationships and connections within the group, and with us as coaches as well. So yeah, we really, there's probably a lot more player-centered coaching now around the female game than what there has been previously.
Yeah, I've got another little story about my year with the girls in relation to that one, and the how they try and do exactly what you say. Can clearly remember this. It was away at Sutherland, down on that grass field out the back, and I was writing out my team on the whiteboard and bits and pieces, put it all out there, 4-3-3 or whatever it was in that formation, and did my talk, my pre-game stuff. Right, this is what we're going to do. Right, we're about to go out and do the warm up, and I remember turning around to the girls, said, "Any questions?" One of the girl puts her hands up and says, "Am I playing more attacking than whoever today?" I was like, "What do you mean?" And I looked around, and the girl that asked the question was the left back for the day, and the girl that she'd asked the question about was the right back. Look at the whiteboard, and the way I wrote it, I wrote the back four on a, not massive, but on a diagonal. Yeah. So the left back was further forwards than the right back was. You would have need the spirit level out and to measure it. It was not drastic. And I was like, no, just go forwards when you can, no difference. Yeah. And it's just like, and then, that really hit it home for me right then, how you needed to be careful with the language that you had used, or in that case, writing it down, because if I had put her intentionally a lot further down, I could be setting her up to fail in that game, that she's getting in behind all the time. And it's my fault if she's coming off at that game, having a bad game, and saying, right, whoever, you've just got in behind, someone's going behind you 6 times. And not that they're going to tell you, but they're in their head, they're going, but you told me to play high.
Yeah, exactly.
Not through my verbal instruction, but through my diagrams that I'd given, because words and pictures are so important.
Yeah, definitely.
We have another question here from Angelo. So it says, Nadine, out of the players who have progressed through the professional football from Institute, what do you think have been the key mental attributes that those players have differed from their teammates, who are all clearly talented players?
Look, I guess when it comes to mental attributes, I can only kind of go off what I personally have seen, and not, kind of preempting what the players are thinking necessarily. But I think definitely is a winning mentality. And I know we try not to focus too much on youth football around wanting to win. But, you know, when we're looking at the girls from the Institute program in particular, where we're trying to prepare them for that next level, you know, being W League or being a national team, you know, those environments are about winning. You know, and they're starting to, you know, they're progressing on their professional journey. So for me, is definitely, you know, the players having that winning mentality. And winning mentality can be, you know, anything from, you know, defending on the field, never giving up. It can be, you know, recovery from an injury, showing resilience, things like that. So that would definitely be one for me. And I know, you know, through my relationship with W League coaches and national team coaches, is that that's what they look for in a player. You know, they want to see that winning mentality from a player. Yeah, so that would be it from me. And I guess another thing that probably sets, you know, one player aside from another is what we call the 1%ers. So again, for all the coaches in the room, I'm sure you know what I mean by those 1%ers, but just doing those extra bits of you know, work and you know, being focused and things like that when, you know, you may not need to be, or there's not an expectation to be, and getting extra touches on the ball and things like that. So yeah, so for me, in terms of what separates them, will definitely be those two things. So 1%ers and a winning mentality.
Great question, Angelo. All right, next slide. So taking this on a little bit further, not so much comparing it males to females, but more just looking now at the female aspect of things. But here's a couple of points where we can find characteristics about a player, essentially. Nadine, how have you found player-coach engagement, particularly around the female players that you deal with?
Yeah, so again, probably just back to my point before about the player-centered coaching and needing to manage players a little bit more individually, and definitely that, you know, you can't treat all the play. And again, it, you know, probably it does go across male and female, no comparison, but you know, you can't necessarily always treat every single player exactly the same. And again, you know, we go back to learning. So some might be a visual learner, some are a practical learner. And, you know, again, just, you know, looking at some of the points that are on this slide, you know, some of the girls are at different stages of their lives. So they could be, you know, potentially in the same team, but they're at different stages in terms of, you know, whether it's their physical development, again, you know, short player, tall player, you know, maybe one's going through their menstrual cycle at the moment or menstruation. So, you know, they might be a little bit bigger than others. And so, and again, different levels of confidence and things like that. So yeah, definitely it's about managing the individual more so, I think, now than previously, where the focus probably would have been about managing the team. And yeah, so that for me is probably the biggest thing in terms of, yeah, but from a player to coach engagement, for sure.
On that one, something I found very prominent in when I was coaching the girls team was you had to be careful when stopping and intervening in sessions, because if I wasn't quite correct with my language, and if I said any questions, got that, or something like that, that could open a can of worms that I'd never really experienced with the males. You would stop, you would coach, and you'd want to hurry through it because you could kind of feel the rolling eyes and the daggers. Oh, we just want to play. Why is coach doing this? But with the females, it was very a case of, all right, well, stop. Now can we have a discussion about this? And what about plan B and plan C and plan D? And if this girl does this and this one does this, and you could almost do like a whiteboard session right there in the middle of the field. So it really challenged me as a coach to ensure that I could articulate what I wanted to get across quickly, because you don't want to spend 40 minutes talking, you want to spend 40 seconds.
Yeah.
But making sure that I didn't try and make it too long-winded, too open-minded, and I just wanted to get direct to that element. And if something happened, great, we'll stop and deal with that bit later on. I was really surprised by how many questions they ask in comparison to males, which changed the way I had to coach, because I wanted to make sure that, and then, as you said, having that one-on-one discussion, because, all right, great, that's a good question, have that conversation afterwards. And they'd come and find you and ask you that question, where the boys would be like, nah, I'm going to kick a goal, or I'm going home. Done.
And I also find with the girls too, Dan, is that, just to your point, is you may have an intervention during a session and you stop and you show them something, and then there's a couple of questions, but later on, I feel like the female player will come up to you and say, I didn't understand what you meant. Can you show me on the board what you meant? For me, again, that just comes down to that, them wanting to be impressionable and wanting to please you as a coach and things like that. But they're also not afraid. They're not afraid to ask the question because they want to impress. So, and again, just that the way of learning, I could be out there and one player might understand what I'm saying in terms of that intervention, but another player will come up to me at the end of the session and say, Nads, can you please show me that on the board, because I didn't understand what you were saying, in the session. So
the analogy that I've given before on coaching courses is Harry Potter. You look at the first Harry Potter movie, who's the person in the classroom that's putting their hand up and asking all the questions? It's Hermione. Harry Potter and Ron are saying nothing. It's exactly that way, and it's not a way that coaches you are challenged to make sure that you have the answers, but you've also got to embrace that, because it's so powerful that if they can get extra knowledge, there's been a couple of times where I've been like, boys, I really wish you'd ask more questions, or are you sure you really know? Are you actually listening to me? So next one, confidence. I guess my little story in terms of confidence in females football is it's very easy to break, very easy to bring them down, and that can be through external factors, that you can see the goal and they think that's the end of the world, or they think that they're being subbed because they've had a dreadful performance or what have you. And I guess kind of links back to that coach engagement, that you've got to be good with your words. I don't know, just bring you off to rotate the minutes round or what have you, and have that conversation piece in there, and making sure that all players are confident enough to go and try things on the ball, because if they're not, you see a massive difference in performance there, which I think it's not different in terms of resilience. I think it's leading to they're afraid if they don't do the right things, they're not going to please the coach or do what the coach wants, and they kind of overthink that. So that might be sort of the other end of the spectrum of them asking so many questions, is if they're confused, they can question what they're doing, and that can inhibit things. So how would you, as a coach, trying to find that middle ground where you've got them doing the right things with confidence, keeping them at confidence, but then what about probably the player that's getting low minutes or making mistakes? How do you sort of deal with that one? Because the players are playing well, they're easy, right?
No, it's definitely not easy. And it's probably, I'm probably still learning, to be honest with you. And I've been coaching for 20 years. I don't think you ever kind of get it perfect, but for me, the biggest thing is probably just the communication from a coach. So I guess, again, it's one, understanding the player. Are they coming back from injury and their confidence is low? Do they need that additional, positive reinforcement, positive feedback? Again, they might do something small on the field, but that was quite successful, or, presented a goal scoring opportunity or even a goal. And I'm very quick to make sure that I encourage that and acknowledge, what they have done. So again, it's about understanding the players and what level they are at, and what, I guess, level of confidence they need. And some may not need anything, or some may not need as much from you as a coach. Some of them have that kind of internal, confidence, where they know they've done something well, and they're happy within themselves, and they don't need you to reaffirm that. So yeah, I guess, finding that middle ground is just about that. It's about communication and how you communicate that and when you communicate it. But again, you just really need to understand your players to be able to find that ground.
Yep, I'd agree with that. And that, I guess, is very, if not the same for the criticism, that you've obviously got to give negative feedback at some level, but how you can deliver that has got to be in the right, delivered in the right tone. Sometimes you can be brutal, but probably going to be very different as to what it is with a group of males, particularly coming from a male. I found that it can be interpreted slightly stricter or harsher than it's probably meant to have been.
Yeah, definitely.
How have you found environment in terms of females wanting to play with females, particularly now we have numbers where we can do that, and obviously the institute has grown to that position. Versus sort of when it was always just mixed team, the one girl in the team who often played as a defender because she was a little bit slower because she physically is different to the boys or something like that. Have you found that environment changes has helped?
Yeah, so I mean, certainly the environment has changed. I mean, you referred to Emily Van Egmond before, and some of the other girls that are in that current Matilda squad. A lot of them started their youth football in playing with boys, and the environment that we see now, I think, does cater a little bit more to a broader range of females, because back in those days where it was only I guess predominantly a male's game, and you see your Emily Van Egmonds and Tamika Butt, or Yallop, sorry, you see these girls that have made it to that top level that did come through playing with boys, but potentially there could have been a couple of other girls that could have been equally as good as either of those two players if they had the female only environment to play in. And again, it comes down to all girls are different, so some of them may not, and I know it's the same with coaches, even coaching courses now. A lot of females won't, and we might get into that with the next bit with the coaches, but a lot of coaches won't want to or are reluctant. A lot of female coaches are reluctant to jump on a male or on any coaching course, because it is predominantly males on that course. So it can be intimidating, and it can be, a bit scary. And the same is for our young female players. So a lot of them may not have wanted to play with boys. I mean, I get a lot of girls that come through the institute program that, we have conversations with, and a lot of them say, I didn't want to play with boys. I only want to play with girls. And I think that the environment now certainly caters for that. And it obviously puts us in a very good position further down the track to have a better base of talented players for sure, because they've got more, opportunities.
How would you say that playing with the boys or girls, either one, is better for football development side of things?
Yeah, so I think for me personally, is that I believe that they should be in a boys' environment until they get to a point or an age where they don't feel comfortable being in a boys' environment anymore. And I don't put an age on that. Basically because every girl is going to be different. So a female, again, once they start menstruation and things like that, one girl might start at 12 years old. And if she is playing with boys, and that's, it's a very personal thing, she may not want to continue in that boy space and wants to be with girls that, I guess are the same as her and understand. Whereas another girl might not hit that point of their physical development until 14 or 15. So they may enjoy playing with boys until that time. So, but definitely from a youth perspective, we would encourage them to play with boys for as long as they can. And obviously every player is different, so it would be up to the player, but that's what we would encourage. And I guess any inquiries or anything that we get from players wanting to go up to that next level, that would be the advice that we give them. So play in a boys' environment for as long as you can, and then jump over to the girls' environment when you feel that it's the time to do so.
I would. I have two daughters. My oldest one has played. She started at one of our local clubs for under sixes. So she's under sixes and under sevens in a mixed program. And I was always of the opinion she won't play for very long. I think she was going to float between different sports and bits and pieces. And even myself and my wife, who took her down to the games, would comment about, got to do a little bit more running. You're too busy looking at the airplanes, and you're all. She was typically the one that's hanging out at the back and not getting involved as much. Strangely, to our surprise, she continued all the way through, but she's now playing in the under nines comp. But when it got to grading this for this season, we actually asked her, do you want to do mixed or do you want to do girls only? She wasn't too sure. She'd obviously only played mixed so far, so she'd never really had the experience. But we thought we'll take it to the girls grading first, because that's going to have the lowest numbers, and see what's like. And day one, loved it, and straight away, literally came off the field that day and said, "I'm not going to the mixed grading. I'm just going to stay with the girls."
Yeah.
And her level of engagement in football has not been higher. COVID has had an effect. She's not kicked the ball as much, but she basically joined up for Hills Football Academy on a Monday night. Not long before that, I think it was the start of term one or something in the girls only program there. She's done every term since. She wants to go to training because she wants to be with those girls, and her level of interest is risen, particularly watching the Matildas Olympics. She loved it. She was getting up and watching Great Britain or Australia, whichever one was the most convenient time frame.
Yeah.
So I think it is, not only is it the skill level element, but it's also, if they don't love it, then that's the other factor. We want them to make sure that they have that engagement, like you said, that you might have had a bigger base to start with if they've had that enjoyment factor for longer.
Yeah.
Last point we might discuss on this slide before moving on is probably the distractions and the other influences. Personal opinion is that girls probably have more options in terms of sport than the males do. Typically, boys, if they're going to play a sport in winter, do they play, which of the football codes do they play? And you're one or the other. You're not going to flop between too much because they're different skill sets. But with the females, from a parent point of view, both of my girls, both done dancing, both love swimming, both done football, both done gym. And it's like, where does it stop? So there's neither of my girls have done netball yet, which is probably going to be the next one to come into it. I think females probably have a little bit more choice in what they can do in terms of sports, which is a different challenge for administrators and coaches and stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny you say that, because I literally just had a conversation with a coach the other day, and we were talking about the lack of good goalkeepers coming through in the female space. And he actually said to me, he goes, "Nads, I'm going to go down to the local basketball courts and I'm going to pick a basketballer and bring her across." Definitely, we are competing against other sports with the girls, and I like that they have a variety. One of the goalkeepers that is in our program currently, she plays basketball, and her mum said to me, if she does come across the institute, does that mean that she has to give up basketball? And I said, no. She's a goalkeeper, so we want her to play a sport that has the skills that are also relevant to our game. And I think you look at Sam Kerr as another example.
She was AFL, wasn't she?
Yeah, so she was AFL, and she's fantastic in the air. She's one of the best, female footballers in the air. I think it obviously gets to a point where it will be a distraction, but I think definitely for their younger years, and as they start to work out, who they are and what they like, and what they're good at and things like that, I definitely think other sports is a really good thing for them.
We have another Angelo question. We'll have to see where the rest of the group have got questions coming in. But have you found that most talented girls are typically very talented in multiple areas, physically and academically as well?
I would, to the first part of the question, so talented in multiple areas, I would say yes. And that just goes back to my point around the baller goalkeeper that we have, and obviously Sam Kerr being AFL, previously AFL. I would say yes, because, you know, like I said, the skills that are required with some sports like a netball, AFL, basketball, they're so relevant in our game. And I think it is underestimated how relevant and how you know, much use they do have in our game. And I think, so, you know, like I said, we would encourage the girls to do other sports, you know, even being in our full-time program. And just to that point again is that, you know, we actually wanted to incorporate, and we're still, well, I'm still looking at doing this, is incorporating other sports into our training program. So as an example, you know, we wanted to get an AFL coach down, and, you know, one night, let's say one night a month or whatever it may be, the girls actually do another sport, you know, because I think it is so beneficial, and I do think that it will contribute definitely to their to their talent in football for sure. In terms of academically and physically, yes and no. It's kind of, physically is a 50-50 one for me. And again, I go to my point around the US team, as opposed to, you know, potentially a Germany or a Netherlands where they're a bit more technically, you know, talented. I think, you know, physically is probably going to be taken away a little bit from our game now. And academically, I think, in terms of a lot of, I'll use Rachel Lowe as an example. So for any of you that don't know Rachel Lowe, she is part of the national team environment, and is also, I think she's with Sydney FC W League, possibly. But anyway, Rachel Lowe came through our program, and she still is one of the smartest footballers I've ever met. Just so intelligent. She could see things. Her distribution forward, in between players, was just phenomenal. And she was, you know, one of the smartest footballers I've ever come across. She was actually very, very academically smart as well. You know, was top of her grades in school. Parents were very focused on her schooling, which was, you know, absolutely fine. But yeah, so I think to some degree there, you know, there would need to be some academic intelligence to have football intelligence. But then on the other hand, I don't think that, you know, the most talented footballer needs to be academically smart, to be where they are or to be good.
Got a question here from Amanda. At what age do you draw the line of encouraging players to engage in multiple sports at a high level? Amanda coaches under 13s GSAP team, and she's finding that players are coming to training fatigued and exhausted because they've been obviously doing lots of training or other sports at school, because they've been doing the cross country or what have you.
So look, for us is probably once they get to that 17, 18 mark, is when we're starting to prepare them and develop them to go into that next level, that next tier, so W League or national team. I think once they get to that point is probably where, you know, we would probably stop encouraging the attendance at other sports and focus more so on one sport. We do have a girl in our 16s program. So she was 15s this year, but next year she will be in our 16s program. She will continue. She's another basketballer. She will continue basketball for next year. But again, I think once the next 12 months, you know, is done for her, I think she just needs to potentially step into one sport more so than the other. Again, it's a probably multifaceted type of question, because I think as well, the key thing for me is that you really need to monitor their loads. So if if you are going to encourage or accept that they are going to play other sports, then it might mean that they need to give up football for one night, as an example. But then you need to weigh up, is it going to take away, by them doing the other sport, is it going to take away from your football team? Or is it going to, potentially add an advantage on, depending on what the sport is? So I think definitely for me with that question is player load monitoring. You really have to be on top of it. But again, probably around that 15, 16 age is where we would say, you probably have to look at one sport, make a decision, stick to that sport. Because I don't think that playing multiple sports after that point in time at our level is going to be achievable at all.
Not everyone can be an Elise Perry.
Well, yeah, true.
She's got to choose, right?
She's an exception to the rule, I think.
So that sort of brings to an end our players discussion. Now on to coaches. So really, what makes an ideal coach? That this is just some bullet points to that, and I don't think it necessarily makes a massive difference between for a female or a male. But some of the research that I did leading up to this suggested that qualified continually learning, which great, you guys all tick the box, continually learning on here tonight. Organized, got control, can communicate, respects the players, feedback, constructive as well as positive, supportive, motivation, can then make adaptations to training, make them hard, make them fun, committed to helping the individual's goals, high expectations as well, which I found that one can be a challenge with females, that necessarily my expectations were perhaps a little bit higher, and then you don't want to set them too far ahead, because then that becomes demoralizing to their confidence about trying to achieve those bits and pieces as well. Be a role model, be a mentor. So that, as a blanket, is a great teacher, right? Be it a coach, be it a male, be it a female, be it at school, be it away from school. So I don't think things change drastically within that, and it comes back to what we said about 99% of males and females are the same, but it's that 1% that really makes the difference. And understanding what makes a female tick and how they think, and hopefully we've discussed a number of those things already, then it's up to the coach to make sure that they can adapt within that and make sure that they can communicate effectively, make sure that they can motivate effectively, and make sure that they can get the best out of their players. And it doesn't mean that a male has to coach a male, or the other way around, or males going to coach females, because it comes down to what they work best with, right? I've seen many male coaches that said, no, I don't want to coach males. I prefer working with the females. And I've seen the other way around, with females only wanting to teach females, for example. But you see it a lot less with females coaching males, I guess. That's probably the next step in terms of us as coaches. I'd love to see in the professional game a female coaching a men's team. We had rumours, was it last year, of the Chelsea coach being linked with Wimbledon over in England. But she knocked that back, which rightly so from what I saw, because she said, why would she go from the top division of female football to Division 3 of male football? It should be severely comparable, which I thought was a very interesting way to think about it. Do you think it's likely that we'll see a female leading a men's team professional-wise?
I think that we will. How long it will take, I don't know. But again, we've just come so far in female football, and not just from a player perspective or from a coach perspective, but also in terms of refereeing and things like that. I mean, we've seen female referees in the A-League on the albeit it's an assistant ref as opposed to the center referee. But I definitely think that we're on the path to getting to that point. Dan, how long it will take, I'm not too sure. I think we will more than likely see it in, probably our local, I guess, national competition of the A-League before we see it in an international or a national team environment. But I think I do think that it's very achievable. There's some very good female coaches out there that, we all know of and that are doing some great things, not only, within Australia, but also internationally as well. And, yeah, I do think that it's achievable, in particular with our competition, the A-League.
When you played, did it make a difference having a male or a female coach?
No, to be honest with you, no. For me, it's always been the best person for the job. So I don't care, when we're looking at our institute program as an example, I'm not fussed whether they're a male coach or a female coach, as long as they're the best person for the job. Whatever the job that is, whether it's, more skill acquisition with our younger team or whether it's more performance phase with our older team. Yeah, for me, it doesn't matter. And definitely as a player, I had both. I did have male coaches and I had female coaches. I was fortunate enough, where I was playing at the time, both the male and the female coach that I had actually both played for Australia. So that was Stan Ackley and Taryn Rockall at the time. So for me, neither was any better than the other. To be honest with you, they were both fantastic coaches and were the best people for the job.
What's something that the males on the call might need to be considerate of when they're coaching the group of females?
I think, again, I know I keep talking about it, but it's understanding the individual. The female game they're very different. They're very different in stages of their life. They've got different home environments. They've got different school environments. And so I think the more that you can understand the individual, then the better that will make you as a coach, because it will allow you to, I guess, understand how you need to deal with certain situations. And that could be as simple as an intervention, but it also could be with your feedback and things like that. So, definitely for me would be understanding the player and being able to communicate. So, to your point earlier, Dan, about the communication, we need to be able to communicate well with these players, and the communication, your communication style is going to be very different, from one player to the next. So for me, it would, definitely be understanding the individual.
So looking back into the Hills football space, we have a current ratio of basically 1 to 10 of female registered coaches versus males in our local association ranks. And this is actually fairly common across New South Wales. So I guess one of our challenges is to try and increase the number of females that are coaching. Obviously, we don't want to do that at the expense of losing males. We'd love to have assistant coaches and co-coaches, and obviously grow more teams, so there's more need for that to go forwards. But any tips from yourself as to how to encourage more females to be coaches, or I guess what really encouraged you to get into coaching, and what could we use that to help some of the other volunteer parents rather than it being the dad?
Yeah, I think, from a volunteer parent point of view, again, there's so much more investment in the women's game now, and there is, more eyes on the game for sure. Different environments. I think now's a good time for female coaches to get involved in the game, because they do have such a broad landscape of who they can coach and where they can coach. And I think, just as important as it is for us to have a player pathway, is that we really need to have and I think we do have, but probably not in the physical sense, is that we do have a coaching pathway. And I think, you know, the more that we can educate people on what that coaching pathway is, and you know, for some people it might be that they want to go, you know, to the very top, and for some it might not be. They might be, you know, just enjoy coaching their kid on the sideline. But you know, I think definitely being able to provide them with more opportunities. And I think, you know, to my point earlier around some female coaches, you know, maybe being a little bit too intimidated to be on a male coaching course. I do think that the female-only coaching courses are a really good way to go, especially at the association and club level. I think once you start to get to that next, you know, the top level, I think you kind of need to battle it out with the best of the male coaches that are out there doing their, you know, whether it be a B license or an A license. But certainly, you know, like a youth component or an association component in terms of the courses, the more that we can have female only, I think that's the way to go. And again, you know, female coaches are very similar to the players in that everyone's different. When I first started, I guess my motivation was that, you know, I could see the pathway as a player, but I mean, I'll be honest, I wasn't good enough to kind of get there, you know what I mean? So that's when I started getting into coaching, and I thought, you know what, I can see the pathway as a coach, and I'm going to get there. But I guess my personality and attitude towards it is probably very different to a local mum, you know, that might just be wanting to help out the association. So for me personally, you know, I was quite confident to go on male courses. I didn't have an issue with it, and I still don't now. But, you know, again, it's if I could offer any advice to the female coaches, is that you do need to go out and be confident, and build that confidence, and, you know, present yourself in a sense of that you should be there just as much as anyone else that's potentially on that course, and that you're also there to learn. You're there to develop, and we're not perfect. You know, I'm certainly not perfect. I'm still learning. I'm still developing every single day, you know, as I coach and as I work. So, and I think everyone's in the same boat. But that would be my advice, you know, for some, you know, coaches, I guess, from in the more elite space is definitely just have that confidence to jump on the courses and, you know, show people what you have, and be brave to do that. And then, yeah, from a more of an association point of view, definitely the female only courses is the way to go for me.
So we trialed this year as our first year of female only courses. Unfortunately, we didn't get to run it because it hit the week that COVID hit for us. But I guess from a personal point of view, I was always sort of slightly skeptical that I wanted to be equal. If I'm just providing a course for females, well, why am I doing something different for the females than I am the males? But then we looked at it and went, well, we can't just do the same thing and expect the results to change, because we might have a group of 20 males on a standard course, but you probably only got 1 or 2 females. And the only courses where that's been different in Hills football landscape is Mini Rouge space. You can get a few more females jump on that, but it's normally typical to certain clubs will have a cluster of female coaches. Then you'll go where it's typical, and then you'll have a couple more little clubs where they'll have a cluster of females. So it really isn't, what we are currently doing isn't working, and it works for the individuals like yourself that are confident enough to go on the courses where they're with the males. But if we want that number to increase from a 10th of the coaching ranks, then we need to provide something different. So we offered a Mini Rouge course certificate through our Female Football Week promotions that was meant to get off the ground with that COVID week. And it was really good. It was, in terms of the success rate from that, was quicker than any other course we had to get to roughly 20 20 registrations straight away.
Yeah.
And we're probably going to go forwards now and increase that for a skill act next year and see how that goes.
Yeah, perfect.
Charlotte, is there any things you want to add on that one for us?
Sorry, I've just direct messaged Dan because I didn't want to cut anyone off. I think, I mean, I can kind of see both elements. And Nads, I'm the same as you. I'm not too intimidated to be on a course where, you know, you're the only female, because that was basically the only options that, you know, most of us have had. I think Bronwyn's probably the same if she's still on the call. But I think what's important and what I kind of want to get at is, as long as we're providing the option or different options. So, you know, someone like myself or Nads or Bron, we're okay to be on mixed courses, whereas some would prefer to be on female-only courses. So I think as long as the options are provided, which, and I know, Dan, you're getting to that, where we're providing those, or at least attempted to, just regarding COVID. I think that's the key to it all, really. And, you know, I think most associations are trying to do that just across the board, really, because it's important. The demand is there, but yeah, multiple options are key, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and we want to make sure that we can not only grow player base, but we want to grow coaches base. And I guess anything I can lastly say on that for female potential coaches going forwards is, some of the best coaches I've seen in a grassroots Hills football space are actually the females. So don't come in with the ideology that you're not good enough or you've never played the game, so you're not going to be capable. And typically, I guess, historically, males have had more access to the game, so they might have the knowledge base. Most of the cases, that's the absolute rubbish in terms of coaching, particularly with the younger players. They don't need to know all these formations and strategies. They just want to be there to have fun and a safe, rewarding environment that you can grow with them as much as possible to be taken forwards. The other point I've got there on the slide there, female coaches programs. We've seen a number of them start to pop up. We've got different programs that are happening, partly around Legacy 23 and bits and pieces. But I'm quite proud to announce on here that Hills Football will be providing their own female coaches network or program next season. We've still got a bit of work to do around the structure of that and what that looks like. But essentially what we're trying to provide in that space is a group of females in the Hills area coaching different clubs, different levels, that you have a safe space where you can come and have conversations, where you can potentially get extra training and upskilling if you're feeling that you're not at the level that someone else might have been, and try and remove as many barriers as possible to say no. I, as a female, not coaching, but and try and give a few more. Well, I'll do that, and we know that Hills Football will provide potentially 3 or 4 more extra touch points for females to get some encouragement and some support along the way, as well as your local clubs. But we're seeing a few of them come up as well, right? Because Football New South Wales have announced one, Football Australia have announced one. So yeah, it's definitely something that's going to be valuable, and hopefully 5 to 10 years there'll be none of them because there'll be too many people to cater for.
Yeah, no, and I know I'm pretty sure it's the next slide, but yeah, the Legacy 23 is certainly helping in that space. And yeah, Football New South Wales and FA are doing a lot in terms of, female coaches network, as Julia mentioned just before, and the in the chat. As well as, from a development and access point of view from, national team and FA. So, definitely some very good things happening now with the help of hosting the Women's World Cup.
Yeah, so there it is, Matilda's 2023 World Cup. Hopefully it's our best chance of having a high place, getting the trophy in the Matildas rather than the Socceroos. So just a bit of background for us to hopefully get us a little bit more excited than we've seen. So Matilda's FIFA rankings averaged quite well. Strangely though, in the update, Matilda's actually went down in the rankings since this one. So I think their actual ranking is now 10th. So they went down in the rankings, even though in the Olympics we did quite well. So I don't know how the rankings are working on that one, but we're obviously doing all right. And then looking at previous tournaments, unfortunately, we haven't had too high of a place other than the Olympic Games, but we've had some tough groups along the way through the World Cup, and you obviously got to knock out some big nations along the way to stand any chance of winning at a World Cup. But with this group of players, we do feel like potentially anything is possible, and obviously being on home soil gives you a little bit of extra boost.
For sure.
My daughters are already excited about going to see, so I'm hoping that I can manage to get some tickets along the way. I haven't been to a football World Cup yet in my life, male or female. So I'm definitely very excited to see it as we go. But I guess from a Football New South Wales point of view, what's the plans with Legacy 23, and what potentially changes in that space for us to be aware of?
So look, I guess I mean I'm not across a lot of that side of what's going on in the office. So, but I can certainly put you guys in touch with, I guess, who is leading up the female coaches network from a Football New South Wales perspective. So that's Sam McGowan. And then, from an FA point of view, which is probably where I sit a little bit more in terms of kind of what they're doing with high performance coaches. It's all about just growing the women's game, and it's it's all about increasing the representation of women in coaching positions. So now is a really good time for some of your local female coaches to really get involved in the game. There's so many opportunities. There's so many things going on again with the Legacy 23. So coaching networks, opportunities for mentoring, and again, I go back to the association coaches or the mini Roos coaches, and encourage them to ask you guys, Heels Football, the question, and ask for help and ask what you can do and where you can go, because there's a lot of support there. Obviously Dan's on the call and Charlotte's on the call. There's so much support around now in this space. There's people at Football New South Wales that you can contact, and obviously the next level being FA. But there's a lot going on for this Legacy 23, because they do, and I think I'm pretty sure they're looking at a 2027 target. So they're looking at, obviously starting, well, we're starting now, but I'd say probably more 2022. So they're looking at a kind of 5-year legacy plan. And they have some targets of where they want to be in 2027, I'm pretty sure it is. It's literally about empowering women, developing new champions. So, and I'm talking coaches, not players. Developing new champions in the women's game. That's what it's all about.
So that brings us nicely, basically, to the summary, right to the end. So we'll just go through this and then open up the floor for some discussion. But essentially, football is one of the few mainstream winter sports in this country that attracts a strong number of males and females. However, we do recognise that they're not exactly equal yet, and provides us, be that individuals, coaches, players, associations, greater availability for growth in the female space. And definitely, if we look at it very crudely, on a Saturday, the grounds are packed with the typical boys games, but there is still some field space on Sunday. So we're almost at capacity with the males. But we definitely want to see a little bit more growth on that in terms of equality from there. But in order to provide equal opportunities or that growth, we need to make sure that we can't just tarnish everyone with the same brush and assume that just open up play football January each year is going to be enough to attract some individuals to come in. And we want to make sure that we are attracting role models for young, teenage, and slightly older, slightly being the kind word, of females to come and join the game at whatever level that is, because we want to make sure that we can provide something that is equal across the board, which I think football has that unique sort of element to it in comparison to a lot of other sports, that we are able to make that attraction a little bit more realistic as we go. So let me just finish this and then we'll open it up for some discussion. So we've got a question here from Bronwyn. In your experience, do female coaches experience other barriers aside from confidence, such as work, family, and time constraints? So in terms of my experience, definitely. Unfortunately, it is too much assumed that the female will be the one that stays home and looks after the kids a little bit more, and the male potentially goes outside of the home a little bit. And definitely in my household, we're very much like that with my work schedule. So as much as I want to champion female football as well, I also am limiting the effect that my wife can have on her potential sports or other things as well. So there's definitely that. But I think on the other side of things, though, we can challenge why can't the male be the one that looks after the kids just as much as well? Because equal parents and everything as well. So that helps. And I think certain things like Friday night competitions have helped with that, to provide access at maybe less traditional times, to allow players to get access out on a Friday night for a game rather than a Sunday, and it doesn't clash so much with potentially kids sport as well. But Nadine, what potential other barriers do you think that female coaches might come up against?
Yeah, no, I think, definitely family or time constraints is one, but just to your point, Dan, I think that's changing quite a bit now. So probably a while ago, 5-10 years ago, I think the perception was that it was the female that was at home, looking after kids and things like that when you do have a family. But I think now, it's very different, and we see a lot of, not just coaches, but we see a lot of players still playing the game that are family people and do have families. And I think if you're passionate about it and it is something that you want, then you'll find the time and you'll make it work. I mean, some of the coaches, female coaches that I work with, closely and directly, is they manage it. And I think your workplace also needs to support you in that sense as well. So yes, it can be a constraint, but I think those particular constraints in terms of family and work constraints, I think are starting to, diminish a little bit.
So I guess this is the time when we ask you, if you've got a question, unmute yourself and free for all, go for it. Everyone's heard us talking too much, have they? Anyone got any other last points? Any questions they want to raise? Any opportunities that they can think of? All right. Well, that brings us to the end of the evening then. So Nadine, thank you very much on behalf of Hills Football and all the participants this evening. Thank you for joining us and sharing your side of the game, your experiences, and try to add in a lot of value to this going forward. So thank you very much for jumping on.
Thanks for having me, and thank you to everyone on the call for joining. And I'm sure Dan, if most of you know Dan, he'll give you my email address, and I'm free to contact at any time if you want to discuss anything that we've looked at tonight a little bit further, or anything, or even in terms of mentoring. You know, we're more than open to having coaches come down and watch institute training sessions and things like that. So more than happy to be a support and a help to any of you on the call, and similarly to Dan and Charlotte as well, I'm sure.